Oof, Edo, welcome to another edition of the No Chofters podcast. I'm Stel. It's cold at the moment. The UK, we're getting that weather now. That cold snap is on its way, and I can feel I've got the hoodie on. All right, it's 6 o'clock in the morning, but it's still cold. Trust me. I've got a special guest, boys and girls. Gareth Jennings, a good friend of mine. How you doing, mate? You good?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you, Stel. We're the opposite. It's just starting to warm up here in New Zealand.
Yeah, see, for the benefit of our viewers or our listeners, Gareth is based in New Zealand. Even though he's from the UK, he's based in New Zealand now. He's got the wonderful weather, he's got the wonderful beaches, everything. And actually, do you know what? I think I'm the only one missing out here because most of our viewers are in Cyprus and they got the wonderful everything as well. So I'm the odd one out.
Yeah, you're definitely missing out, Stel. You need to either get to Cyprus or New Zealand. A little bit of warm weather and some of those nice beaches. I think all the
100%. Well, mate, people are going to be asking, who's Gareth Jennings? And this isn't a disrespect to you, it's because obviously people in Cyprus aren't going to really know who you are. But I can tell you guys that Gareth has spent time as academy director at Bristol City, the same at Leicester City, at Stoke City. You were recently the GM of high performance at New Zealand, the Football Association, and you also work at FIFA. Now, you've done a lot, mate. You've done a lot. How are you coping?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it's been busy. Obviously, I've been really lucky to see a lot of the world, and obviously in a football context as well. So it's been really good. I've had some really interesting roles, some really diverse roles. Yeah, probably the highlight being obviously FIFA and looking after technical directors and globally. So yeah, very good. I'm well, still enjoying the football. I'm doing some consultancy now around a number of clubs and with a number of different federations, usually in a sort of technical advisory capacity. So yeah, the journey's still ongoing, and long may it continue.
Good, mate. Good, very good. So, are you still working at FIFA for like a contractual basis? Am I right? You're still doing some work with them?
Yeah, I've been doing consultancy work with them. So I've been doing some mentoring with one particular technical director, and then obviously any additional work that comes my way from FIFA is always beneficial. But the work the sort of big amount of work that I'm doing a minute is really with a number of federations, which is independent from FIFA, and that's mainly sort of technical advisory work. So looking at national team coaches and how they work, but also probably looking at talent ID pathways in those countries, how we can develop them further, and what their talent identification processes are. So yeah, it's still varied. And I've still got some work in the club environments as well. Nothing in the UK at the moment. So the work that I'm doing is in the US and then some in Australia. So yeah, it's a little bit different, but no, it's all good.
That's good to hear, mate. And I'll tell you, one of the main reasons why I wanted you on this podcast is because the way that our club Omonoia is being run at this moment in time, especially at youth level, it's almost as if the DNA of Cypriot football is changing. Over the years, we've had hundreds of non-Cypriots playing in the league at the same time. Some clubs fielding mostly foreign players, as we've seen a few times in the Premier League, don't get me wrong. But in Cyprus, it became a bit of a problem. Young players weren't developing correctly. They weren't given the opportunities. But now, our club Omonoia, we went through a big restructure, I'd say back in maybe 2017, 2018, maybe a little bit before that. And the culture changed quite a lot. And now we've seen the introduction of many youngsters, some of them playing national team football, even as teenagers. One of them recently moved to MLS to play for Sporting Kansas. And again, as I said, the mentality is changing. They're trusting a lot on youngsters, which is, I think, very important. But when you've got managers like Henning Berg, who was at our club, giving them opportunities, when you got someone like Neil Lennon, who's still at the club, again, continuously giving youngsters an opportunity. Given your experience, especially talking to other technical directors from abroad, from perhaps developing nations, how important is it for them for youngsters to benefit from first team football, whether it be at the club that they're at or maybe even out on loan to a lower league club?
Yeah, I think sort of first of all, it's really really important. I think when a new manager comes into a club, that the owners are really clear around what their what their vision is for the club, and having some really clear objectives for them. So obviously, when a manager comes in, there's going to be a really clear objective around winning games of football. You want to be successful, but then what's that commitment around youth development, and what does the long-term strategy look like for the club, which is where the technical director or the sporting director will come in. They'll support the head coach, but they'll be looking at that long-term vision and being able to give young players an opportunity as part of that. So if you've got a commitment to the sustainability of the club, not just financially, but in terms of players coming through, hopefully the sporting director is then looking internally before you're looking outside of the building, and you're giving players opportunity. Now, sometimes that will be set by the league. So there are some leagues around the world that have some criteria in terms of you must play a number of players who are under 20 or under 21. So it's set by the league. So that's supported. But usually in a professional league, it's set by the club. But being able to give players those opportunities to come through, gain experience at first team level, or even things like being able to travel with the team, being able to train on a regular basis so they get into that environment, so they're used to it, is hugely beneficial. And look, you usually don't know until that player stepped into that environment, until they've actually got on the pitch. You know, there's been some surprises where, you know, there's been a number of injuries in clubs and players have had an opportunity to go in and play. And they've surprised people. You know, they jump out at you. You don't know how they're going to transition into that environment and how they'll adapt at that particular time. So yeah, if you've got a manager that's bought into the philosophy of the club, like you say, Henningberg and Neil Lennon have done that, have come in and given players opportunities. You know, that's great, and long may it continue. We have some big challenges globally where, you know, you don't get young players getting those opportunities to come in or be in and around the first team, and sometimes the regulations or the rules don't lend themselves to it either. So yeah, it's great. You know, if you've got a club philosophy, the owners are setting it, it's really clear objective for the head coach, and that's been supported throughout the club. You know, it sounds like it's heading in the right direction.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what, mate, I'm sure you've noticed this as well, but you've got clubs like, for example, Liverpool. They've got academies everywhere. They've got one in Texas. I know there's one in Cyprus as well. They've got them scattered all over the world. And I'm guessing the primary reason for doing that is to get more talent on board and cast the net wider, so to speak. But how do you think that affects clubs within those regions? And I'm using Cyprus again as an example because I know there's an academy out there, a Liverpool Academy. But obviously, when you've got a small island of maybe 1 million people, and there are maybe 5 or 6 big teams, and when I'm talking about, you know, size-wise, I'm talking about history, I'm talking about finances as well. Because again, I'm sidestepping here, but Omonoia probably aren't the richest club in Cyprus. There are 2 clubs with Soviet owners, shall I say, who are now pumping a lot of money into their academies, which is not bad. But when you've got the likes of Liverpool with their academies in little regions like that, how do you think that affects the clubs on the island in terms of their recruitment for bringing in youngsters? And as you said, talent ID.
Yeah, I think there's probably... It's probably sort of twofold. Obviously, I think there's probably a commercial perspective to that as well, where actually, you know, they're trying to sort of spread the global name of the club. How much that academy is then connected back to the professional academy in the club environment. Sometimes it can be really loose. However, we're well aware of the impact that can have on some of the smaller clubs based in certain countries. So it is a real challenge. What I would say, and I speak to clubs about this in New Zealand and in Australia and in the US, and is just making sure actually the focus is on yourselves, because you can't affect what you can't control. So actually making sure that you get a really good environment for your own academy. There is that professional pathway that exists where players are getting opportunities to progress into the first team. And then hopefully the young talented players will start to recognize that and start to sort of say, actually, no, I don't want to go to that big club's academy that's in our country where actually there's not a pathway that exists. I can now see that actually the best opportunity for me is going to be to go into this particular club. But yeah, certainly it's certainly going to have an impact. And look, we know some of these big clubs have got global names, and like you say, Liverpool, Man City, Chelsea, from the UK, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich. They're huge globally. They've got academies all over the world. But I think the professional clubs in those particular countries, if they have a really good environment that young people want to be involved in and want to go to, where their potential is recognised, they enjoy going there, they love the environment. That for me would be where I'd sort of focus my time and just say, look, let's get this environment right. Let's make it so that there's a really clear, transparent pathway for young people, but they actually love coming here. I think when you get the club right, it's a club that people love going to. So, when people talk about Leicester winning the league, it was a club that people, players love to go to. So they've done really well with young players coming through and the progress in the club because the environment's been right, and a really good environment to go to. Players just love being there. And that's how
you were there when they won the league, though, weren't you? If I'm not mistaken, were you there when they won the league?
Yes. Yeah. I was there when they won the
atmosphere there, mate.
I
think you had a few cans. Yeah, is that right? You had a few cans.
Yeah, I think there was one or two flowing. Probably the bit that people don't know about Leicester winning the Premier League, it was that they had more minutes for Premier League debuts than any other team in the league during that particular year. And that was just because they got this environment right, but they also had a long-term plan. So it was never just about winning the league that year. That obviously came as just as much a surprise to them as it did to everyone else. The plan was very much long-term, and that's obviously they've got some challenges this year, but that's continued to exist, and they've continued to have success, and they've continued to have young players coming through. So yeah, I would say the same to any professional club with any academy. If you get your piece right, it doesn't take parents and young players long to realize actually that's where I want this young player to go to. But it's always going to be a challenge competing with those big names.
Yeah, absolutely. And given the fact that you were academy director for two Premier League clubs, Leicester City and Stoke City, when you look at the barriers, or should I say the obstacles that you faced as the director of these clubs, now we're talking about clubs that, Leicester City, multi-million-pound profit. I know Stoke are Championship at the moment, but at the time they were doing very well financially. What do you think were the challenges that you faced, especially when it came to, I don't know, maybe progressing youngsters? Because the reason why I ask this question is because we've had a few incidents in Cyprus whereby maybe a young player who's done well in the first team has perhaps had their head turned by another club's interest from abroad. And there's been a lot of external influences that have been perhaps affecting his performances, his mental health, etc., be it family, be it coaches, be it the club, the president, the vice president, all these factors. So is that one example of something that you've been through, or has there been other examples where you felt this is beyond my control? What can I do to help resolve this situation?
Yeah, I would. So in the UK, they'll talk a lot around the sort of the FA's four corner model, which is technical and tactical and physical on one side, and then psychological and social on the other. And probably the bit where there's the biggest focus or the biggest amount of expertise is that sort of technical, tactical, and the physical elements, where there's a real big focus. And then over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, there's been that shift in, right? Well, we need to make sure actually we get the social and psychological piece right for young players coming through, because that's always the challenge. Being able to cope with that high pressure environment, and being able to progress all the way through. And what I've sort of always find is you get a lot of bronze medalists, or I would call bronze medalists, that actually come through in the end, because they're the ones that have had to strive and cope and sort of hang on every year and to get that next contract to move to the next age group. Whereas the ones that are sort of top of the tree, actually when they get that next challenge and they've never had it before, is a real, it's really difficult to cope with. But certainly I think, the big part is those sort of external factors that come in. So your head's turned by a big club, or there's something at home that's not quite right, or something at school that's not working for you, or it's usually something external that has that impact on your performance. So I think the bit that's in the club, there should be the expertise that exists there to be able to support and nurture. But it's making sure that actually those people who are the experts in the club environment also have an awareness that, these are young people that we're dealing with. They're people the same as us. They want to enjoy going to work every day, because it is, it's a work, it's a business, it's a working environment. They must love that environment, but also sometimes they need an arm around them, and they need looking after. Sometimes they need some direction, so you need to challenge them a little bit more. But it all needs to be done appropriately. So I think that's the key. For me, the bit that I think that's probably missing at the moment is, in a lot of academies, I think a lot of them miss out on the education piece. So do we get the education bit right? These young people now need to be really effective learners when they step into an academy environment. We'll put A license and pro license coaches in front of them. We'll put sports scientists in front of them, nutritionists with PhDs that have the information. Hopefully they're getting it across well enough. But actually, if the young person's a really effective learner, and how they become an effective learner is at school. They don't teach you French to go and so you can go and live in France, or teach you history to go and work in the Tower of London. It's so that you can become anything that you want to be. And it's the same in the football environment. If you're an effective learner and you pick things up quickly, what you'll find then is in the training environment and the game environment, you'll start to self-correct. You'll start to observe and notice things and scan probably a little bit better. And so picking up a lot of the skills that are required to be professionals or top players. Look, I think in an academy, in a professional environment, there's a lot of challenges. Always getting what we've spoken around already, getting them across the line. So how do we get them into that first team environment? So having really good relationships with the head coach and the sporting director, and understanding what those objectives are and the types of player they want, and what positions that, what's the structure of the club, or what's the structure of the first team environment at the moment. Is there certain patterns of play that they want to adapt to? So you've got to be able to give the young players those tools to come through. So when they get that opportunity, it's not the last one that they have. But a number of huge challenges. One that we used to talk around at Leicester City, and it was Claudio Ranieri that sort of spoke around it, was increasing the number of substitutes on the bench. So even if you didn't use those players, just getting them into the environment, being in and around the first team. And if you're in a 3-0 lead or a 2-0 lead with a few minutes to go, you've got an opportunity to put a young player on the bench. So you're giving those opportunities on a more regular basis. That was something that he was always really keen on. Hopefully it's starting to turn a corner. And certainly in the UK, there's been a lot of young players coming through, and the academy system seems to be working really well. Hopefully UEFA and FIFA are now supporting that with the talent development system, and starting to implement across clubs in Europe and the globe. So hopefully we'll start to see some club environments really affected by that and really supported with their young players.
Brilliant. Well, I need to ask you about your time with FIFA, football's governing body. It's come under a lot of criticism, not just recently, but over the years, with certain people in charge, etc., etc. And now they're talking about the World Cup. All of a sudden, the World Cup in Qatar. They're talking about human rights, etc., etc., etc. And I'm not one of these people where I'll be like, oh, you shouldn't have that tournament there because of their human rights. I'd be a hypocrite. I've been to Dubai numerous occasions. So for me to be critical of hosting a tournament in a similar culture, a similar environment, it'll be hypocritical. But I keep talking to other people about this and I say to them, look at your phone. Where was it made? Oh, it was made in China, made in Singapore. Do you really think that phone was created under great working conditions? Look at the things that we have from a materialistic point of view, be even our clothes. If you look at the label where our clothes are produced, do you think they're in nations where people are getting paid correctly or fairly? So when I see the criticism FIFA receive, it's not a surprise. But again, it's the hypocrisy. And I just wanted to make that clear before I, because people are going to say, oh, you're going to lay into FIFA. Because I don't bite my tongue, Gareth. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't bite my tongue. And people will say, oh, you tell it like it is. This is me telling it like it is. So you having come from Stoke City, Bristol City, Leicester City, to end up working for FIFA, how much of an eye-opener was that for you? Because we're talking about, a global company, but with so much power and so much influence.
Yeah, do you know what? It was fantastic. I've got to say, being there in a full-time capacity was really good. Obviously, I was in the same team as Arsene Wenger, and to have someone like that, where you've got one of the world's greatest brains on football available to you, and not only him, but some really intelligent people that think about the game and have concerns about the game and want to drive it forward is unbelievable. But then having other people that see that sort of social aspect and desire to improve the world. So, hey, look, I would never endorse some of the challenges that we've got in human rights in certain countries. What I would say is I genuinely believe that FIFA want to have the World Cup in Qatar so they can have an impact and make a difference. So I'm hoping it's there for that particular reason. But yeah, for me personally, it was great. And look, I had a huge responsibility looking after the technical directors. So we had 211 globally. But again, great people to work with, people that thought differently across the game about different things and had different views to myself. But FIFA had generated this environment where people were given a platform to speak and air their views and to share ideas. And that's really what we wanted. We wanted this diverse environment where we could look at the game and not necessarily agree on it, but try and find the best ways forward to improve the game, make it more competitive, produce more and better players in the future, and come up with different ideas around that. So when they talk about the biannual World Cup attached to that, so we know with the biannual World Cup there would be a number of challenges with leagues globally, but attached to it they also looked at having annual World Cups for under 17s and under 20s, which makes complete sense from a player development perspective. That actually it's not based on the age that you come through or the age group that you're in. Actually, every year there's an opportunity to play at a World Cup for the under 17s and under 20s across the world, so that everyone gets that opportunity. Because as we've spoken about before, unless you're put on that global stage and given opportunity, you never know. So yeah, for me, it was it was a great opportunity. They're a really good organisation to work for. I know they've historically had a number of challenges, but hopefully they're moving in the right direction. And going to countries like Qatar, I really hope it can have the impact that we want it to have, not just on a football perspective, but also for the lives and welfare of some of the people that live in that country.
I think that's a great way to end the show, mate. I know we've been pressed for time, obviously, with the time difference and everything. I've got a child that has just woken up, so I'm going to have to rush. You've got a child that needs picking up, so you're going to have to rush. But Gareth, thank you for joining us on the podcast, mate. I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile in the synopsis, so people who are on the platform can perhaps get in touch with you, clubs in Cyprus, because I know various clubs watch this pod and various members of staff, they might want to ask you questions. And hey, maybe you can go to Cyprus one day and do some courses, or, you know, just cast the net a little bit wider. What do you reckon?
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm more than happy for anyone that wants to link in or feels to need any support, whether that be one of the professional clubs or a grassroots academy, whatever it may look like. More than happy to help and support. And I would love to get out to Cyprus and go and visit at some stage. And hopefully I can get you there as well, Stel.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. Well, boys and girls, that is it for another episode. We've got Doxa coming Saturday. The international break is done. And then Manchester United on the 6th of October. Oof. Exciting time. So until next time,